This episode of The Chalene Show, I'm going to share with you very personal details of how we keep the spark alive. Because let's face it, the longer you've been in a relationship, the more likely things are to become routine and mundane. Apparently, a relationship is considered long-term if you've been together for more than 18 months. My husband and I have been together for 29 years, and I know that. Right now, I know that we've been together for 29 years. We've been married for 29. We've been together for like 34 or something, like a really long time. But in this episode, I want to share with you like specific things that you can do, assuming that you want to have a better sex life, that you want to enjoy it, you want to just get the most out of it. Like, why wouldn't you? I'm going to share with you some things that I don't know. I've watched a ton of other YouTube videos and I've read a bunch of books, listened to a million podcasts on this topic. And I'm going to give you some suggestions that I haven't heard too many other people share. So I hope it's not too personal, but we're going to get into it. We're talking about sex, so you might want to put some earmuffs on if the kids are in the room. That's what we're talking about here today on The Chalene Show. And by the way, the first part of this episode is, it's kind of for the ladies, but I've got some really important tips that I just want the fellas to listen to. So I'm going to tell you the minute mark at which in the show description, if you want to know exactly what minute mark to head to, if you want to play this part just for your significant others, for the fellas. So today on The Chalene Show, we're going to talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good. My voice just can't hit that note. I mean, it used to be able to. Anyways, one of the motivations for sharing this topic with you today is because I care about your longevity. I care about how happy you are, and I want you to have vitality with every single year that you're on this planet. And we've got to dispel some of the rumors and beliefs, I guess, we've commonly held in society that once you reach a certain age, you shouldn't be wanting sex as much, or it shouldn't be as big of a part of your relationship. I think that's BS. And I think it stems from previous generations not having the same resources and information that we have today to make sex a very enjoyable, very prosperous, very, shall we say, successful endeavor between a man and a woman, especially when we know how things work and how things change as we age. Here's what intimacy expert to millions, Susan Bretton, has to say.
Here's the thing about our sexuality. Your sex life is so healthy and good for you. I mean, it reboots your nervous system. It sends blood, healthy, oxygenated blood to your brain. It releases neurotransmitters. There's a study that 2,500 people were shown pictures of people between the ages of 18 and 80 and asked to guess their age. Mm-hmm. And there was this group of people that everyone guessed to be about 8 to 10 years younger than their actual chronological age. And for a long time, this was a European study. For a long time, the researchers were like, what's the correlation between these people? And they realized that they had intimacy 3 times a week. And if you think about looking 10 years younger on the outside, that's an indicator that you're 10 years younger on the inside. And intimate connection is an indicator of longevity. So I like to talk about extending our sex span, because the more that we can extend our sex span, the longer, healthier, happier life we'll have.
One more tip I want to add, and that is exercising together. A survey conducted by personal fitness app Zing Coach found that 72% of Americans considered sex to be a part of their exercise routine. And in articles reported both in the New York Post as well as Psychology Today, found that couples who share physical activities like exercise together are often more emotionally and physically intimate as partners. So the first thing I want to mention is that you should know that men who are 40 years and older, 40% of them suffer from erectile dysfunction. 50% of men 50 and older suffer from erectile dysfunction. 60% of men who are 60 years and older suffer from erectile dysfunction. Does it have anything to do with how they feel about their partner? Absolutely not. And you need to understand this, ladies, because the same is true for vaginal dryness. The percentage of women over 50 who experience some degree of vaginal dryness is 50%. So like men and women, as our hormones decline, so do other things that make sex a little bit easier. And we're going to talk about all of those things in this episode. But I'm assuming you're listening or watching because you want to have great sex. And I need you to know that great sex is not about toys or dirty talk per se, or new positions or any of those things. Great sex starts with a great connection. I mean, your biggest sex organ is between your ears. It's your brain. 80% of women cannot have an orgasm with penetration alone. We need clitoral stimulation. So that means that only 20% of women are able to have an orgasm through penetration. And very interestingly, we think that number is even lower. A lot of those women, anatomically, the clitoris is located much closer to the opening of the vagina. So even though I'm going to share with you as many tips as possible, I think it only makes sense to point out the obvious, which is if there's no connection, yeah, that like I don't have any tips that are going to change that. Like it does absolutely start with a connection. So kind of like assuming that you've got that connection, assuming that things are okay between the two of you, and maybe a better connection sexually could even improve a lot of different areas. That's possible. But if the two of you just don't are tolerating each other and not really crazy about each other, there's not much of a connection. I mean, it starts with that connection first. A sexless relationship, experts say, is any relationship where you're only having sex between 10 to 12 times per year. To me, I'm like, well, those people are still having sex. Isn't sexless having no sex? Anyways, technically speaking, that's supposed to be a sexless marriage. I want to start by saying, and I'm not a sex expert. I mean, I've got one person that I've been with for the last 30 plus years. You don't need to know my body count, but like, I'm not an expert, but I know how to find the experts, and I've had great access to them. And in fact, I've had some great sex experts on this show, like Susan Bratton. I will link to those previous episodes below in our show description as well. One of the most common questions couples often have is, how much sex should I be having? And I know people want to know this because when I give my Instagram audience the opportunity to ask me anything, they always want to know, like, how often do you and Brett have sex? And I think it's kind of irrelevant because the right amount of sex is the amount that's right for both you and your partner. Like you both agree with it. Like you both feel rather satisfied. And I don't know that there's ever going to be a situation where both people want the exact same amount, but I think that's kind of rare. I think more often than not, like one partner wants a little bit more than the other, and you just reach a compromise. So that's what matters. And the quality of the sex, it's not even how often, it's how good is it? And we all know that there are different seasons of our lives where it's just not as conducive. It's just not as easy to fit it in. Do you know what I'm saying? Like maybe you have other people living in your home, or you're traveling, or you're on different works. Like there are times. So the question you want to ask yourself is, are we satisfied with the amount that we're having? And when we're having sex, is it great sex? Because if it's not, let's improve it. As you've heard me say many times on the show, most medical schools spend about 4 to 8 hours talking about women's hormones and the decline during perimenopause and menopause. So it's not uncommon for our doctors just to not even realize how much estrogen and testosterone and progesterone all affect our sex drive.
For the majority of women, our libido is actually driven by estrogen, not testosterone. So one way you can think of it is that a testosterone-driven sex drive is the need to just orgasm. Not that women don't have the need to just orgasm sometimes, but testosterone is not the main driver of female sex drive. Estrogen fuels our libido. It's estrogen that brings sensual enjoyment to sex. Estrogen drives our need for sensual foreplay, our need to be aroused, our need to be wined and dined, and that's why your falling estrogen levels in menopause can flatten your libido.
So as estrogen starts to decline, so too do many of our body's functions. So we'll start to have drier skin, vaginal dryness, the tissues start to thin. So like the skin on your arm, on your neck, vaginal tissues, they all start to thin. And those tissues, especially the vaginal tissues, can start to atrophy, meaning they I don't want to say go away, but they start to shrink. They start to look less plump. They start to have less vitality. These tissues start to become thinner. And as they become thinner, sex then becomes more painful. So now you've got vaginal dryness, which creates friction. And you've got a thinner vaginal lining and thinner tissues around the vagina. And it's no wonder that sex can become very painful. Then on top of that, remember, sex is like, for women especially, it's like what's going on in our heads. So if you're having a decline in estrogen, we see like a much higher rate of anxiety and depression and negative ruminating thoughts in women who are not doing hormone replacement therapies. This is the same is true of testosterone. So testosterone does, of course, help libido. But the thing that most doctors are, usually aren't talking about is the fact that testosterone affects our brain. And that's where sex really starts for women. Like that's, guys, the wind can blow and they're ready. And we're like, my body doesn't work that way. Like it kind of has to start between our ears for us. So if sex is just painful, it's no wonder you're not having great sex. So we have to talk about, first of all, lubrication. That's just period, end of subject. Like we've got to stop feeling shame around that. It's no big deal. Just get some. Even if you are fully lubricated, if you are just as wet as a pool, that's fantastic. Still, just bring lube into the bedroom. It makes everything so much easier. And I've got a couple of different recommendations that I got from previous doctors that we've had on the show. So these are completely non-toxic and water soluble. I will put a link to a couple of those in my show notes. It's just a must. In the same way that you need to understand your partner's occasional erectile dysfunction has nothing to do with them being turned on or not turned on by you. And I know it feels like that. You guys need to have a conversation about this, because the same way that has nothing to do with them being turned on by you, you know that to be true, because the level of moisture you have, or whether you're dry or not, has nothing to do with whether you're turned on. Usually has nothing to do with whether you're turned on by your partner or not. It's hormones, and we both have them, and we have to let go of the stigma and this misinformation that has anything to do with our partner. Have this conversation, because he might be thinking it, even though like rationally he knows that's not true. You might be thinking it when he has an issue. So have this conversation. Have this conversation before it even becomes an issue. But I want you to know there's nothing wrong with you if you just aren't into sex and you've addressed all of these things and you're just not into sex. It might be because your partner makes it feel transactional. It might have something to do with unresolved past trauma. It might be the result of like an injury or an illness. I mean, when you're fighting cancer, when you're dealing with trying to help your body heal, sometimes the last thing we're in the mood for is getting it on. So give yourself permission if you're going through one of those seasons, or if your living situation just like, you're taking care of a grandchild and you just can't relax. Our brains have to be fully into it in order for us to enjoy ourselves. So, if that's part of the problem, if part of the problem is the way you feel about your body, I want you to let go of that, because you don't care. You're thinking about it more than your partner is. And if it's really bothering you that much, do something about it, but also embrace the fact that like we're getting older and all you have to do is turn the lights down a little bit lower if you need to do that. Okay, now here's how I want you to think about sex. It's important. Just like a hobby or a sport or a goal that you want to accomplish, it's important, right? It makes you feel much more connected to your partner. It feels good. Your body was designed to experience pleasure. This is going to make you live longer. You're going to have more vitality. You're both going to be happier and more connected. So this should be something that I hope is important enough to you to treat it like anything else that you want to improve, right? So if you want to be better at pickleball, or better at roller skating, or better at, I don't know, you want to be more flexible, whatever it is you want to be better at, or a hobby, etc. And that was your goal. How would you tackle it? Well, you would practice more often. You might buy books or listen to podcasts. You might find experts who you can tune into and like learn from them, because they know so much more. So this is how I want you to think about, if this is a goal of yours, which I hope it is, to improve your sex between you and your partner, I want you to think about these things and be very intentional about it. I mean, I personally have been very intentional about it. When our kids moved out and we became empty nesters, there was just like a moment, there was a blip where I was like, this is starting to feel like the same thing. You know what I mean? Like same bed, same time. You're on this side, I'm on this side. You roll over first, or like it's kind of felt like the same, right? For a little while. And so I decided to improve our sex life. By the way, if I haven't already asked, make sure you subscribe. We've noticed recently our statistics show that 40% of you are subscribed, but 60% of you are watching and you haven't yet subscribed. And that's not nice. I mean, maybe you didn't mean to hurt my feelings, but it kind of hurts my feelings. So do me a favor, just subscribe and I'll just feel better about all of this and we can just put it behind us. All right, back to sex. I think sometimes for guys, it's like as long as it's mission accomplished, and you know what I mean by that, then they're like, what's there to improve? But I want it to be more exciting. And I don't know how to do that. I'm not the expert. So I started studying. I started doing all of these things, looking for experts, reading books, listening to podcasts, practicing more. I mean, right away, immediately, things got better. In fact, I am going to ask you to do me a huge favor. After you finish watching this episode, I want you to come back like 2 days later and tell me if things didn't improve, like almost overnight. Wait till we get to the end of the video because trust me, I have some things up my single sleeve for you today. But I'm going to ask you to come back and tell me how things improved. Okay, so let's get to it. I want to share with you specific strategies, specific things that have really helped Brett and I to keep the spark alive. And some of these are things you may have heard from other experts, and some of these they're just what work for us. So take what works for you and get rid of the rest. The first thing is you have to shift your thinking. And I think this is especially true for those of us who are of a certain age where sex was just taboo. Like, in school, we learned about sexually transmitted diseases and don't get pregnant, and I don't know about your household, but like sex just wasn't talked about. And if a girl was having sex or having a lot of sex or good at sex, then she was a slut, right? Like it was like the worst thing you could be is easy. So it was just something we didn't talk about. Like even with my girlfriends, they get so weird when I bring up this subject. I'm like, why are we so like it's such a normal, natural thing, but we have been raised in a different time, right? And so it can feel a little, you almost feel like a shame, like, oh, am I dirty girl? Or but sex isn't just about somebody's needs. It's so much more important than that. So we really have to destigmatize it. One of my favorite books to help destigmatize this is called Come As You Are. Come As You Are. It's so good. So the shift that needs to happen is between you and your partner. You both just need to recognize like, this is a natural, normal conversation, and we're going to get better at talking about these things, and we're going to get better at having sex. My second tip for you is to outsource communication. What do I mean by that? Well, if you listen to just about any sex expert, they're like, you have to communicate openly about sex with your partner. And I don't know about you, but like, even having been with my husband for 3 decades almost, when I started down this like journey to like spice things up, it was a little awkward. Awkward taco. You know what I mean? Like, so here's what I did. And I hope this tip is helpful. I would say to him, hey, so I had a friend or somebody recommended this podcast for couples that are like interested in like spicing things up. And then I'd say, if we're going to take like a 20-minute drive together or whatever, I would say, do you mind if we listen to it together? I mean, your partner's going to love that. Like, what? Okay, cool. And so it almost made it as though I didn't have to bring up a particular topic and I could kind of like look at him and see how is he responding to this. And it was kind of funny. It almost felt like we were newly dating again because we kind of look at each other and like, like laugh and go like, what do you think about that? Yeah, I don't know. Like it just was it was a way to ease into that conversation. Then eventually we started having that conversation between the two of us. So we would use like a podcast or an audiobook. That's another idea. And by the way, so if you're someone who's very Christian and this is a difficult subject because of religious beliefs, there are so many great Christian authors, or, insert the name of your religion. There are authors who specifically are experts in sex and also come at this topic from the viewpoint of their faith. So that's an easy way for the two of you to start talking about these things. My next tip for you is to, when you're talking about sex, is to make it really simple. Like I'd start off by this. I would like the next morning or the next afternoon, and this is kind of like sexy talk, but it's also communication. And I would say, so, okay, I would send a text. That's always easier too. I'd send a text and say, what was your favorite part of last night? Easy, right? So it's just like simple little ways to have this conversation. Now, if you want to really go all the way there, go there. Another tip I have for you. Sex is exciting when it's new. So after you've been together for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it's no longer new. That novelty has worn off. And part of what really turns people on, we know this to be true, study after study, is the novelty and the newness. So how do you keep that going? When you've been together for a really long time, you've got to create newness. And one of the things this is such a great tip. Like, I've not heard anyone say this. Like, this one is so good for so many reasons. Okay, what I'm about to tell you is going to protect you, and it's also going to create that excitement and newness. So I want you to use an app other than iMessage or other than WhatsApp, like whatever way you normally communicate with each other. I want you to download some kind of an app, like maybe it's Telegram or some other encrypted version of text communication where the only person you chat with is him or her. Okay. And also only use that particular app to send, inappropriate. We wouldn't want somebody else to see these text messages or these photos. That's why it's really important to use something that's encrypted. The other reason why this is such a good idea is because you don't want to accidentally be sending the wrong group chat, the wrong photo, if you know what I'm saying. I haven't personally done it, but I know people who have. Can you imagine? I would die. I would literally die. So this is something Brett and I do. We have a special app that's encrypted. I'm not going to say it just because I don't want anyone to ever hack my phone. But yeah, there's some photos on there that could definitely be sold on OnlyFans. And that's where we communicate back and forth with like that. It's a different kind of, it's so interesting too, because we'll be texting back and forth about work, and it's just like, and then all of a sudden I'll get the ding or that notification right in the middle of a text from him that's related to work. And I'll get this other message from him that's, very sexy talk or a photo or a request for a photo or whatever. And it's exciting. We've been doing this now for a couple of years, and it's really fun and exciting, and it keeps your conversations private and protected. My next suggestion is to remember that, especially for women, sex needs to be like all day. And I don't mean like an all day session, but I mean like a guy can lay down in bed and you walk in the room and he's like ready to go. But our bodies don't work that way. We have a very long runway. Like, it takes us a long time to get warmed up. I mean, a long time. And it's not just about the body. Like, we have to mentally be there or it ain't happening. So my recommendation is to have this conversation with your partner. Don't worry, I'm going to tell him. He's got his part coming up shortly. But tell your partner, or you start the conversation early in the day. That is, I swear, this is one of the things that has kept Brett and I like really connected in this department for a very long time, is we've always done this. I mean, from probably the first year that we got together, it's like, we're constantly flirting and talking about each other's bodies and praising each other, appreciating each other's hard work, the effort that we spend taking care of ourselves, eating right. We praise each other in terms of like the things that we do for each other that make us feel appreciated. It's just like that gratitude, especially for women, like, oh my gosh, that goes such a long way. You have to start with us emotionally first, right? And so be the one to start that conversation early in the day. And if you can keep that going throughout the day, and then just think of it as an all day, like, I know by 10 a.m. if Brett and I are having sex that night, which is most nights, but by 10 a.m. I already know, because we've already started to flirt. We've already done like little hand touches and said little comments or sent little messages on our special app. Like, we start early. And the earlier you start, ladies, the more ready you will be later in the evening. Now, once you're doing the deed, one way to make things spicy and new is with sexy talk. Sexy talk may be that you've never said those things before, or you've never asked for those things before. There's nothing sexier than newness. And if you're like, I don't know, I just can't go there, Chalene, this doesn't have to be like R-rated or X-rated or the things you hear people say in pornographies. It can just be something as simple as asking your partner, if they like what you're doing, to ask for direction. Should I do this faster or slower? Do you like it this way or that way? Is your brain going everywhere right now? Come on, I haven't said anything inappropriate. It's your mind that's going there. And I'm excited about that for you, because that means that like there's a spark there. But just asking for simple directions is one way to start talking more while we're in the act. And that's newness. So newness is so important in your sex life the longer you've been together. So how do we create newness? Newness can be adding a new toy. What is the hang up? Who cares? Buy a vibrator. Buy something that's like super duper basic. I mean, you do know that 80% of women cannot have an orgasm with penetration alone. We need clitoral stimulation. So that means that only 20% of women are able to have an orgasm through penetration. And very interestingly, we think that number is even lower. A lot of those women, anatomically, the clitoris is located much closer to the opening of the vagina, which means they're probably getting some stimulation there. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that because you kind of have to know how your body works. And sex is a lot more fun if you're having an orgasm, right? And you should be having an orgasm. Well, it would be nice if I don't know if you should be, but it'd be nice if you could have an orgasm every time. And the likelihood that that's going to happen is much, much, much higher if you're using a vibrator. So you can have some kind of clitoral stimulation. And I think this is an important conversation that you should have with your partner. You can order these things. There's so many websites where they ship the box to you and it's very, very discreet. I mean, Amazon, if you want. I'm going to link a couple of different vibrators below in the show notes. And while you're at it, you should probably pick up some lube as well. But again, the key to great sex is having some kind of novelty. And you don't have to be swinging from the rafters or doing anything like crazy that generations to come would be ashamed of you. But it's so simple to do something new, like a new outfit, or walking into the bedroom in a pair of heels, or maybe just wearing castor oil or a headband, or creating a different mood in your room, like just using a sexy light. So, for men, they are turned on by visual images. So it's not, that's why, women, we want the lights off because we don't want to be distracted by visual images. And men, they typically, they want to see. That's what excites them. So one nice little trade-off in midlife is to use like a black light or some of these LED lights. I'll link to a couple of them. I've got one that you can just plug into the wall. It's like $13 and it just gives the room this kind of like sexy hue, but it's not so bright that you're like, oh no, my skin. Like, no, I think it just kind of sets the mood. Another way you can create newness is picking a new location. And that might be you like starting things off outside of the bedroom or in another room, if that's a possibility. Get a hotel room for the weekend or on your next vacation, or just do something spontaneous and new that's out of the ordinary. It's about breaking the patterns. And we can break the patterns by adding sensual oils, by adding aromatherapy to the room, by considering different playlists. I've got a great playlist for you. It's called the Tantric Sex playlist. But it's just like really sexy music, but it's not too distracting. I don't know if you've ever had a playlist on or a song on and you're like, oh, okay, well, this is not going to work, especially if you're ADHD. That's another thing I haven't mentioned, but I have inattentive ADHD, and that's sometimes really hard to focus. So I have to spend a considerable amount of time before we do the deed, like kind of like letting go, getting rid of my phone, making sure there's nothing on my mind so I can be like fully present and engaged and not distracted, which is why it's really nice to have a playlist that is, it's sexy, but the lyrics or the music isn't distracting. And again, I will link to my Spotify. I didn't create this playlist. I found it, but it's great. So I will link to that below in our show notes. And while we're on the subject of newness and something that's exciting is fantasy talk. Now, I know for me, this was something I didn't even know how to do this. I didn't know how to share it. I didn't know if it was okay. I didn't know if it was normal, until I started like down this road of wanting to have better sex. And one concept that I heard that like totally freed me, and I don't even remember where I heard it, but I heard one of these experts, sex experts, say like, fantasy doesn't necessarily mean you ever want to do that thing. In real life, it's just something that's for play. It's just something that is exciting in your mind, but it doesn't necessarily mean you really want to do that thing. I was like, oh, okay. Well, then game on. This is kind of fun. So if you've if you haven't had these kind of conversations with your partner, it's very awkward at first. So I want to give you like specific tips on how to have these conversations. A couple different ways. So one that you can say, again, you're gonna work yourself up to this. One thing you can say is, I had this really sexy dream last night, and you just insert a little bit of your fantasy. Remember, you're completely different people. You're raised in different households. You're completely different DNA. You've had different experiences. So your partner's fantasies may be completely different than your fantasies. And even if either of you have fantasies about of other people or other scenarios that neither of you would ever want to, they're just fantasies. It's not about you personally. You shouldn't take it. It's not real. It's make believe. And I think that's a really important thing for both of you to discuss, because I know I had a really hard time kind of like talking about fantasies, because I'm like, I don't want to give them the impression I would really want to do that. Like, or that I would in any way, shape, or form be into that, because like, but I'm willing to talk, like pretend and fantasize, but I don't really want to do that. And I think that's an important conversation, so you can let go and know that there's no miscommunication between the two of you, like you're on the same page. But to start off with, like to say like, oh, I had this dream last night. Or another thing that you can say to your partner is, why don't you tell me a really sexy story? And just let them make up their own fantasy. And remember, like, part of having great sex is making sure that your partner's turned on and knowing what turns them on. And for women, it's about like how they make us feel, right? And I think that's probably true for both partners. Like, it's how we make each other feel. So thinking about what turns your partner on and kind of playing into that, but also making sure that they know what turns you on. Because this isn't just about pleasing our man. This is about accepting the fact that we have bodies that were built by God to experience pleasure. Like, you have a part of your body, the clitoris, it serves no other purpose besides having an orgasm, just for pleasure. So embrace it. And if you're midlife, if you're menopausal, like now you're in the after party, you don't even have to worry about getting pregnant. Like, game on. Like, that is, if you're not in menopause, let me tell you, ladies, you get to look forward to this. It is so freeing. I can't wait for you to get to the after party. You're going to love it here if you're taking care of your tissues. So that's my next tip for you is like I said, if you were trying to prepare yourself to get better at a hobby or better at a sport, it's a skill. You're going to take care of your body, right? Like, you're going to make sure that you are in tip-top shape to perform whatever that sport is. So your sport, the thing that you want to get better at is sex, then you need to take care of your tissues. That means, please have a conversation with your healthcare provider. Ladies, if you are perimenopausal into menopause, talk to them about estrogen. If you don't have a healthcare provider who is specifically trained in menopausal hormone therapy, hormone support, find someone who is, because oh my gosh, the nightmare stories that I hear from those of you in this community who tell me the things that your doctor has done and said that are so they're like 20 years outdated, and they're putting your health at risk. Frankly, they are. by not being up to date. And we can't blame them, but it's your responsibility to advocate for yourself and find a healthcare practitioner who is expert and has been trained in menopausal and perimenopausal and hormonal health for women. And that would include looking at potentially supplementing your estrogen. And of course, we can talk about progesterone and testosterone, all of those things, but you need a healthcare provider who knows what they're talking about because you want your tissues to be in tip top shape. The last thing in the world you should be experiencing is painful sex that could be rectified by a simple vaginal cream, like an estrogen cream. Now, if you don't have a healthcare provider, I have talked many times about MIDI Health. MIDI Health is I don't know if they're sponsoring this show, but I talk about them all the time because it's a resource for people women in all 50 states. It's covered by insurance, super affordable, and it's fast. Like you can get into a practitioner so quickly. In fact, I just called 3 days ago and I have an appointment on Friday. So you can get in really quickly. They also have amazing breast cancer survivorship program. So if you're someone who's like, yeah, I'm interested in doing hormone replacement therapy, but I just don't know if I'm a candidate because I have a family history of breast cancer, or maybe you're a breast cancer survivor, again, talk to your healthcare provider. Because if there's a medical solution for you and or your partner as it pertains to enjoying sex by just supplementing your hormones, why not? As always, I will put the link to MIDI Health below in our show notes, but it's chalene.com/MIDI. Okay, so I've got some great resources for the ladies. I've got a couple of books. I want a couple of different podcasts I'd like to recommend. As I mentioned, I'm gonna put some links to some lubes, some vibrators, all that good stuff below in our show description. But now what I'd like to do is, ladies, I'd like to ask you to leave for a moment because I'd like to have a conversation with the fellas. Okay? All right, here we go. Hi. So I am really excited to have this conversation with you because your lady is really excited about improving your sex life. Like it's already great, I'm sure, obviously, but she has big plans for the two of you. And that's why she was listening to this episode. I want to have a conversation with you that I think is going to really be helpful. And I know you guys have been together for quite a while, and things can become a little more monotonous, more routine, predictable, etc. And we're going to break that up. Like she's got a plan. You need to be ready, my friend, because it's about to get good. And I'm going to be like your favorite podcaster very soon. But I do want to share, like I gave her like 100 tips, but I want to give you 5 that I think are really important. And they're going to improve your game in the bedroom. They're going to improve her level of satisfaction because let's face it, like if she wants it more, like you guys are going to have it more, right? And hopefully you want to have it just as much as she does. So the first thing I would just want to mention, before I get to my 5 tips, is you should know that women and men, each of us, according to our age, so women who are 40 years and older, 40% of those women will experience more vaginal dryness. But guess what? 40% of men who are 40 years and older will experience some degree of erectile dysfunction. And erectile dysfunction may have nothing to do with you being turned on by your partner. It's just like things don't work the same. It's called hormones. And the same is true of vaginal dryness. So please, I'm begging you to understand that as she ages, so 50% of women who are 50 years and older, 60% of women who are 60 years and older experience more vaginal dryness. As our estrogen starts to decline, vaginal dryness sets in. So we're just going to use lube and it's going to be amazing. Fellas, you want to make sure that you're doing everything you need to in terms of from a health standpoint to make sure there's not something going on. It could be nerve related or prostate related, or it could be related to testosterone. And so why not talk to your healthcare provider? I gave the same advice to your girl. This is just what we do. Like we take care of our teeth, we take care of our joints, our muscles, our bones. We should also be taking care of our reproductive health, our hormonal health. This is how we're going to live longer with greater vitality. So take care of that. All right, now let me get to my tips. Number 1, I know you guys have been together for a really long time and I know you are smooth as silk, but I need to tell you, slow down. No matter how slow you think you're going, go slower. And here's what I mean by that. I don't mean like your in and out movement. I mean before you hit the target spot. So fellas, you guys are ready in an instant. Like the wind can blow and you're like, let's go. Lady, we are so much slower to be ready. We need to be warm from the toes all the way up so that everything gets fully engaged and engorged. And it really does start here between our ears. So when I say go slow, I mean like if you're like, oh, it's that time of day when we both go to bed and are we going to do it or not? No. I mean, you need to back it up and things need to start getting sexy early in the day. It's complimenting her. It's engaging her emotionally. Men are turned on visually. We are turned on from an emotional standpoint. Like it's the appreciation, it's the love, it's the adoration, it's the sexy touch, it's the thoughtful bringing her a cup of coffee. It's those little things that make her feel more desirable and appreciated.
I haven't even like laid down and relaxed and had a glass of Chardonnay yet.
Mm-hmm.
And he's asking me if I want to be penetrated,
Yeah.
It's just like so much for us. So what I say to guys is a couple of things. Number one, you want to make her a series of small offers. And, would you like a glass of Chardonnay? Can I give you a foot rub? Do you want to tell me about your day while I rub your neck? And he's going to go, she's going to know I'm trying to get sex. And I'm like, well, of course she wants to know you desire her, but she's not ready to say yes to intercourse, but she would be ready to say yes to a glass of Chardonnay and a foot rub.
Mm-hmm.
And when you begin there, it allows her to relax and let down and let the juices start running and let the flow happen and connect her heart to your heart and get things off her chest that are bothering her. Sometimes it's a matter of just being held for a few minutes, a long few minutes, and then you can relax rather than this kind of like big sex offer.
So that's step one. It's like, let that slow simmer all day. I'm telling you, it'll be mind blowing. Number two is to once, obviously things are going to happen, I want you to slow down there too. Avoid the area that you think you would go straight to. Okay. Like avoid her vagina. I know that sounds so crazy, but literally it'll take care of itself getting real ready if you almost ignore her. So like it's starting like maybe touching her thighs, the back of her neck, maybe if she likes to have you bite on her earlobe or just maybe on her neck a little bit.
She needs 20 or 30 minutes of concerted pleasure to get her genitals to the point that his get to in 2 minutes.
It's just brushing past every area but that area. Maybe do a little drive-by where there's no real touch, but you almost feel like it's about to happen. Like the more teasing you can do and the longer you can do that, the better. You got to go slow. You got to talk to each other and figure out have you stopped kissing? Like, what if you just started by making out? It's the novelty. Trust me. I already had a great conversation with her about all the novelty. So number one, remember, was like to start getting her engaged, like start way earlier in the day, and we've got to slow that process down. Number two was to actually slow the physical process down. Like we're going to hit the target, and you know what I'm talking about. We're going to hit the target like we're going to make her beg for that to happen. Like she's like, what is going on? That's how, like, trust me. Oh, I've got a great tip for you. Okay. If you're ready for this, I will put a link below. This is a pretty explicit podcast. Somebody else did it. And they talk about how to give a proper yoni massage. Okay? Let me just tell you. I'm going to be her favorite girl if you learn how to do this. This podcast is kind of explicit, but I need to know. I need you to come back and leave a comment and say, Chalene, thanks for the tip. Okay. So the number 3 tip I have for you is to just take charge of the romance. Like take charge of the romance and relaxation. Remember those 2 words. If you can romance her, like, here's what we're going to do tonight. And you describe like getting her a bubble bath ready, or that you're going to give her the special new massage technique, something that makes her feel romantic and relaxed. If that's out of the ordinary. Now, if that's what you always do, well, then change it up and make it like down and dirty. Like, we want newness. We want excitement. We want things that feel, oh my gosh, this is exciting. Almost a little like, who is this person? Things that alter the mood, things that introduce the new. She's got tons of ideas, but I want you to be open to that as well. My fourth tip for you is to make it really comfortable for her, for the two of you, to recognize that using a lube is the way to go. I mean, everything is better slippery when wet, right? So even if that's not her issue, more wetness makes things even better. So just buy some so that it can take away a lot of women, for even though we know it has nothing to do with us being turned on, there's like a lot of shame around that. And we feel like, oh gosh, does that mean like I'm not enough woman, or that I'm getting older? It's none of these things are true. So just make it super duper comfortable for her. If you're listening to this podcast on an app, you'll see there's a show description below it. If you're watching on YouTube, the description's there as well. And I've got some links there. The fifth and final tip that I have for you is to really appreciate her body and her beauty. Like, find those little things that make her feel so sexy and attractive. Maybe buy her a dress or something new that's sexy and exciting. That never gets old. We love feeling sexy for you. And studies show that it's really hard for a woman to enjoy sex if she doesn't feel good about her own appearance and how desirable she is for her partner. Like, she almost has to be turned on by herself, if that makes sense, in order to turn you on. And that comes sometimes from just knowing and hearing and feeling appreciated and feeling adored. So don't take it for granted. Even if that means putting a reminder in your phone, it could never be enough. We love a little handwritten note. Like, buy a thing of Post-it notes and leave those inside of her cupboard or on the visor of her car. Just like, surprise her with those sexy kind of things. We love that kind of stuff. She is obsessed with you. She loves you, and she knows the two of you are going to have an amazing sex life, and she wants it to be as delicious as the two of you know it can be. This is an intentional thing the two of you can do together. So I encourage you to talk about these things to make it more normal. It is awkward at first, but it gets easier the more you do it, just like anything with practice. And I am really excited to check these comments and find out, how do things go?